The sprawling Morrison estate stood like a jewel atop Beverly Hills, its Rotting gates gleaming in the Californian sun. Sarah Morrison, the 60-year-old billionaire widow of tech tycoon Robert Morrison, sat in her private office, her manicured fingers absently tracing the rim of a crystal whiskey glass. The Wall Street Journal was open on her mahogany desk, her own face staring back at her from the business leaders section. Morrison Technologies matriarch preserves legacy. The article praised her stewardship of the company since Robert's death 3 years earlier, but Sarah barely read the words. Her attention instead fell on the silver-framed photo on her desk, Robert's smiling face on their last anniversary. He had been gone exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 15 days. Not that she was counting. Mrs. Morrison. Her intercom buzzed, Patricia's familiar voice interrupting her reverie. Your new PA has arrived for orientation. Sarah adjusted her Chanel jacket and pressed the intercom. Bring him in, Patricia. She quickly wiped her eyes with a monogrammed tissue, making sure her makeup remained flawless. The double doors opened, and James Chen walked into the office. At 28, he cut a striking figure in his navy suit, inexpensive, but perfectly tailored to his athletic frame. His resume had stood out among hundreds of others: an MBA from Stanford, stellar recommendations, and a thirst for knowledge in his eyes that reminded Sarah of her late husband. But it was something else that had caught her attention during the interviews: a quiet determination, an underlying strength that betrayed someone who had fought for everything he had. Mrs. Morrison. James bowed slightly, his dark eyes meeting hers with controlled assurance. Thank you for this opportunity. Sarah gestured to the leather chair opposite her desk. Please have a seat. Mr. Chen, I believe in starting relationships honestly. She paused, studying his face. The afternoon light, filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, cast interesting shadows across his features, emphasizing his high cheekbones and strong jawline. Do you know why I chose you over more experienced candidates? James straightened in his chair, his hands resting carefully on his knees. I assume my qualifications. Your debt, Sarah interrupted, setting down her glass with a soft clink. $200,000 in student loans, an undervalued mortgage on your mother's house in the San Gabriel Valley. A sister, Emily, in her second year of medical school at UCLA. She held up a folder. I make it a point to know everything about the people I employ. James's cheeks flushed, but he met her gaze confidently. Yes, those details are correct, but I assure you that my financial situation will not affect my performance. A smile tugged at the corner of Sarah's lips. On the contrary, Mr. Chen, that's precisely why I hired you. Hunger makes people either desperate or determined. Your credentials suggest you fall into the latter category. She stood up and walked to the window. Below, the estate's gardens stretched out in perfectly manicured patterns, a maze of hedges and flowers whose monthly upkeep cost more than most people's annual salary. Your duties will extend beyond typical assistant work, Sarah continued, her ghostly reflection in the glass. I need someone who can manage both my personal affairs and assist Morrison Technologies' charitable foundation. The position pays $150,000 a year, with performance bonuses. James's sharp intake of breath was barely audible. The salary was double the advertised rate. Sarah turned to him, noticing how quickly he resumed his professional expression. There is one condition, she added, returning to her desk. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the marble floor. Complete discretion. The tabloids love to speculate about the lonely widow Morrison. Your loyalty must be absolute. Of course, Mrs. Morrison, call me Sarah, will be spending a lot of time together. She sat back in her chair and opened a drawer to retrieve another file. Your contract includes a complete confidentiality agreement. Everything you see, hear, or learn here stays here. As James examined the contract, Sarah watched him closely. His hands were steady as he turned the pages, but she noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he unconsciously bit his lower lip as he read particularly dense paragraphs. He was young, younger than her own son would have been, but there was an old soul about him that intrigued her. One more thing, Sarah said, reaching for the pen. Why did you apply for this position? Your qualifications could have opened up a promising career in investment banking or consulting. James paused, the pen hovering over the signature line. For the first time, his carefully preserved composure broke slightly. My father. He always said that true success isn't just about making money. You have to make things happen. He looked her in the eye. Morrison Technologies Charitable Foundation has funded more medical research and educational programs than any other private foundation in California. I want to be part of that legacy." Sarah felt an emotion flutter in her chest, an emotion she couldn't name. "Your father seems like a wise man." "He was," James replied softly. "He died last year, of cancer." An understanding settled between them, the kind only those who have lost a loved one can share. Sarah watched James sign the contract, his signature clearly placed on the white paper. "Welcome to Morrison Estate, James." She reached across the desk, her grip, firm and warm, lingered perhaps a little longer than necessary. "Patricia will show you to your office and living quarters." "Yes, your living quarters. I am expecting my personal assistant to live on site. The East Wing guest house has been prepared for you." When James left the office that afternoon, neither he nor Sarah could have predicted how deeply their lives would become intertwined, nor the earth-shattering secret that would soon come to light and test them. The chess pieces were set, the game had begun. Later that evening, Sarah stood on her private balcony, watching James's modest Toyota leave the guesthouse parking lot. The lights of Los Angeles twinkled below, like a carpet of earthly stars. She tightened Robert's old cardigan round her shoulders, breathing in the faint trace of his cologne that still clung to the fabric after all these years. "What do I do, Robert?" she whispered to the night air. But only the soft California breeze answered her, bringing with it the sweet scent of jasmine from the gardens below. In his new quarters, James sat at his desk, staring at a photo on his phone. His family, in front of their small house in the San Gabriel Valley, his mother's tired smile, his sister's hopeful gaze. He quickly calculated how much of his new salary he could send home each month. Finally, a way to make things right. Neither Sarah nor James slept well that night, each haunted by their own thoughts about the future, unaware that their lives had just taken the first step down a path that would lead to consequences neither of them imagined. 2 weeks after arriving at Morrison Estate, James Chen settled into a routine that seemed anything but routine. Every morning began promptly at 7 a.m., coordinating Sarah Morrison's schedule while handling the barrage of calls from his associates, charities, and the ever-increasing media. This morning, however, was different. James stood in Sarah's private office, watching her pace the room with obvious distress. The morning paper was scattered across her desk, its headline blaring, "Morrison Technologies stock plummets. Board questions widow's leadership." "Vultures," Sarah muttered, her usual calm shattering. "They've been waiting for this moment since Robert died." She paused at the window, her silhouette silhouetted against the early morning light. At 60, she carried herself with the grace of someone half her age, but today the weight of her responsibilities seemed to weigh heavily on her shoulders. "Quarterly reports show improvement," James chimed in, pulling up the financial data on his tablet. "The stock's fall is purely speculative, fueled by rumors. Rumors that I'm too old, too emotional, too much of a woman to run this company," Sarah finished, turning to him. Their eyes met, and James felt a sudden urge to protect. "Then we'll prove them wrong." He walked over to his desk and spread out the documents he'd prepared. "I've analyzed the company's charitable efforts over the past 3 years. They're not just good PR, they generate lasting goodwill and open new markets." Sarah leaned over his shoulder to examine the charts, her perfume subtle and expensive momentarily distracting him. "Come on," she urged, her hand resting on the back of his chair. "Your educational technology program in underserved communities, it's created a pipeline of talented programmers, now loyal to Morrison Technologies. The medical research grants, they've led to 3 pending patents." James turned, suddenly aware of their close proximity. "You're not just preserving Robert's legacy, you're building your own." A smile crossed Sarah's lips, the first he'd seen all morning. "Robert would have appreciated you, James. He always said the best business decisions come from the heart as much as from the head." The moment dragged on between them, charged with the thought neither dared to name. Then Sarah straightened, her professional mask returning to its place. "The board meeting is at 2 p.m. I'll need those figures already ready." James cut in, pulling out another document, as well as an overall strategy for the next quarter. Sarah raised her eyebrows. "Did you do all that last night?" "This morning, actually. I couldn't sleep." He forgot that his insomnia was more about his thoughts of her than his professional concerns. "You need to rest, James." "I don't want to," She broke off when Patricia's voice came over the intercom. Ms. Morrison, Mr. Richardson from the board is here. He insists on seeing you before the meeting. Sarah's face hardened. Maxwell Richardson, Robert's oldest friend, and now my biggest critic. She squared her shoulders. Bring him in, Patricia. The door opened to reveal a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, his silver hair and tailored suit exuding authority. His smile, however, didn't reach his eyes. Sarah, my dear, we need to talk. Maxwell. Sarah's tone could have frozen fire. I didn't know we had an appointment. Richardson's gaze flicked to James. Perhaps we could speak privately. Mr. Chen is staying, Sarah said firmly. He's my personal assistant and has my complete confidence. Richardson's lips tightened. Very well, Sarah, the board is concerned. This recent stock decline, it's temporary and based on unfounded speculation, James interrupted, earning a glare from Richardson. Young man, this is a discussion between equals, Sarah cut in. And James is right. If you saw the analysis this morning, it's not just about numbers. Richardson said quietly. It's about perception. A widow running a tech company. Your recent isolation. There are rumors. Sarah, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. What kind of rumors, Maxwell? That you're not coping. That loneliness is affecting your judgment. Her voice held mock concern. Some suggest that having a junior assistant living in the city is. James felt his fists clench. But Sarah's dry, icy laughter cut through the tension. How interesting, she said, positioning herself beside James. The same board members who encouraged me to date didn't seem to care about appearances back then. Could it be, Maxwell, that they're more concerned about my recent decision to audit the offshore accounts? Richardson's face paled slightly. That's completely irrelevant, really. Sarah picked up a file from her desk. Because these Singapore branch transactions raise some fascinating questions. Perhaps we should discuss them at the board meeting. The old man's composure shattered. You're playing a dangerous game, Sarah. No, Maxwell. I'm finally learning the rules. She smiled tartly. Was there anything else? After Richardson left, Sarah slumped in her chair, the brief show of force evaporating. Robert always said to watch Maxwell. A shark disguised as a diplomat, he called him. James knelt by her chair. Are you okay? No, she admitted, surprising them both with her honesty. But it'll be okay. His hand found hers, squeezing briefly before letting go. We have work to do. That evening, after a board meeting that had left several members visibly shaken by Sarah's presentation, James sat in his quarters, reviewing the day's events. His phone buzzed, a message from his sister coming through. I received the money you sent. Mom's treatment can start next week. Thanks, big brother. He smiled, but his smile faded as he thought about Sarah's struggles, not just with the board, but with loneliness, perception, the weight of inheritance. His own growing feelings for her complicated everything. In her private suite, Sarah stood in front of her mirror, removing her jewelry. She paused, observing her reflection, the silver in her hair, the fine lines around her eyes. Maxwell's words echoed in her mind. Inappropriate. Solitude affects your judgment. She thought about James's constant presence, his quiet strength, the way he looked at her as if she were more than a widow or a CEO. This was dangerous territory, she knew, but as she prepared for bed, she couldn't help but wonder if some risks were worth taking. Neither of them could have suspected that Richardson's visit was just the beginning. In his office across town, the board member made a call. It's time, he told the caller. She's vulnerable. And this new assistant, he might be just what we need. The pieces were shifting, the stakes were rising, and somewhere in this complex web of power, wealth, and hidden desires, a secret was waiting to append everything. The Morrison estate's private library smelled of leather and old paper, its walls lined with first editions and decades-old corporate archives. At midnight, James sat alone among the towering bookshelves, surrounded by stacks of financial documents. Something was amiss with Richardson's threats, and he was determined to find out what. His laptop screen cast a blue glow over scattered documents, board meeting minutes, acquisition reports, and private correspondence from Robert Morrison's final years. James rubbed his tired eyes, reaching for his fourth cup of coffee, when a name caught his eye. Project Genesis, he murmured, bringing the folder closer. The document was dated 3 months before Robert Morrison's death and was marked confidential executive access only. You should sleep. James jumped at the sound of Sarah's voice. She stood in the doorway, wearing a silk dressing gown over her nightgown, her silver hair loose over her shoulders. He'd never seen her so relaxed, so vulnerable. "You too," he replied, trying to ignore the softening of her features by the moonlight. Sarah stepped into the room, barefoot, silent, on the Persian rug. "I saw the light. What are you looking for?" "Answers." He hesitated, then pushed the Genesis file to her. "Did Robert ever tell you about this project?" Sarah took the document with a frown. "No," but her voice trailed off, skimming the pages. Her face paled. "That's impossible. $3 billion, James said softly, transferred to offshore accounts in the months before his death, with no clear business purpose, without board approval. Robert doesn't." Sarah slumped into the leather chair next to him. "He was many things, but never corrupt." "Maybe not." James opened another document on his laptop. "Look at the authorization signatures." Sarah leaned in, her shoulder brushing his. "Maxwell Richardson. And that's Robert's signature." "But," she narrowed her eyes, "there's a problem. It's dated 2 days after Robert was last in the hospital," James said softly, "when he was already in a coma. The implications were weighty." Sarah's hand found his arm, gripping it tightly. "If Richardson forged Robert's signature, that would explain why he's so desperate to force you to leave now." James covered her hand with his. "The annual audit you ordered would reveal everything." Their eyes met in the dim light. Sarah's fingers intertwined, a gesture, seeking as much as offering comfort. "James," she murmured, "this is dangerous territory. I know." He should have moved away, kept a professional distance. Instead, he found himself moving closer. "But you're not alone in this." The moment stretched, electric with unspoken possibility. Sarah's free hand came up to his face, her touch featherlight against his cheek. "Why do you care so much?" "Because," James started, but the library door creaked open. They broke apart abruptly when Patricia appeared, looking troubled despite the lateness of the hour. "Ms. Morrison, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been a break at corporate headquarters. Security just called." Sarah stood up immediately, her CEO mask back in place. "What was stolen?" "That's right," Patricia said. "Nothing seems to be missing, but someone accessed the management server room." James and Sarah exchanged an alarmed look. The Genesis files, the originals, were supposedly stored there. "Get dressed," Sarah ordered, already heading for the door. "We need to see for ourselves." 20 minutes later, they arrived at the gleaming Morrison Technologies headquarters. In Sarah's Bentley, police cars surrounded the building, their headlights painting the glass facade red and blue. Inside, they found controlled chaos. Security teams huddled around monitors as officers ran fingerprints. Richardson was already there, looking too calm for someone called after midnight. "Sarah," he greeted her softly. "The timing's bad, with the shareholders meeting tomorrow." "Interesting you came so quickly, Maxwell," Sarah replied icily, "considering you live on the other side of town." Richardson's smile tightened. "I was working late at my club." "How lucky, really, really lucky." James watched the exchange, noticing Richardson's left hand constantly touching his jacket pocket. A security guard approached with his preliminary findings. No files appeared to be compromised, but the server had been accessed using management credentials. "Sarah's clearly someone hacked into the system," James said firmly, seeing Richardson's predatory grin. "Or," Richardson suggested, "someone with authorized access is covering their tracks." "The board will have questions, Sarah." "The board can direct their questions to my lawyers," Sarah retorted. "Now, if you'll excuse us." Back in the car, Sarah lost her temper. "They're trying to frame me, make it look like I'm destroying evidence." James reached across the seat. "We won't let them succeed." "But Sarah, there's something else you need to know." She turned to him, the moonlight silvering her hair. "What?" While Richardson was talking, I saw something in his pocket. A USB drive with the Genesis logo. Sarah tightened her grip on his hand. "We need those files." "I might have a solution," James said slowly. "My roommate at Stanford. He's a cybersecurity expert. Off the books, completely untraceable. That would be illegal. Just like forging signatures and embezzling billions." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "Why would you risk everything? Your career, your freedom?" James turned to her. "Because some things are worth risking." The weight of unspoken feelings filled the car. Sarah's hand came up to her face again, completing the gesture Patricia had interrupted earlier. "James, ... Their lips met in the darkness, a kiss both tender and desperate. When they broke apart, Sarah's eyes shone with unshed tears. "We can't," she whispered. "I know," he replied, but neither moved away. In the distance, police sirens wailed, a reminder of the danger surrounding them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the general meeting, Richardson's schemes, the mystery of the Genesis project. But for now, in the silence of the car, they remained pressed against each other, two souls finding connection amidst the chaos. Unbeknownst to them, a security camera captured their intimate moment. In his office, Richardson watched the footage with wild satisfaction. "Perfect," he murmured, grabbing his phone. "Everything's falling into place. The real storm was about to break." The morning of the general meeting promised to be fraught with consequences. Sarah, standing in front of her bedroom mirror, was putting on her Armor Chanel suit, pearls, impeccable hair. Her lips still tingled from the previous day's kiss, a dangerous distraction she couldn't afford today. There was a knock at her door, and James was there, looking impeccable in his charcoal suit. "Your coffee," he said, offering her a cup. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending them both inside. "My virtual contact has arrived," he said softly, placing a USB drive on her dressing table. "Everything we need regarding Project Genesis, the real numbers, the fake signatures, everything." Sarah took the drive, her hand trembling slightly. "Richardson won't go down without a fight. Let him try." James moved closer, his reflection meeting hers in the mirror. "We have the truth on our side." "The truth?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "The truth is, I'm a 60-year-old widow with a crush on her 28-year-old assistant. The board is going to have a field day." James turned her to face him. "Is that it?" "Fall." Before she could answer, her phone vibrated. Rich's name appeared on the screen. "Sarah dear," her voice held mock concern. "Could we meet privately before the shareholders arrive? There's something you should see." About 30 minutes later, Sarah sat in her office, staring at the photos Richardson had spread across his desk. Security camera footage from the night before the kiss in the car, their intimate moments in the library. "Imagine the shareholders' reaction," Richardson said, settling into the chair opposite her. "The grieving widow, seducing a man young enough to be her son. Pretty sordid, don't you think? What do you want, Maxwell? Resign. Cite health reasons. I'll guarantee you a generous pension, and these photos will remain private." Sarah's hands tightened. "And the Genesis project?" Richardson's smile turned predatory. "A tragic oversight. Accounting errors that occurred during your emotional distress after Robert's death. The board will understand. You're asking me to help you cover up a theft. I'm giving you a dignified exit." He stood and straightened his tie. "You have until the meeting starts. Choose wisely." After he left, Sarah stood there, staring at the damning photos. Then she picked up her phone and dialed James's number. "Come to my office now." James arrived a few moments later, frozen at the sight of the photos. "Sarah, Richardson is threatening to report us if I don't resign and take responsibility for Genesis." She looked up at him, her gaze fierce. "But there's more. I discovered something this morning." She handed him a fileload with yellowed edges. James opened it, then sat down heavily to read. This is impossible. Your mother worked for Morrison Technologies 28 years ago," Sarah said calmly. "In Robert's private lab, Project Genesis, the first one." James's hands trembled as he turned the pages. "She never told me anything. She signed a non-disclosure agreement. The project was highly classified, genetic engineering, decades ahead of its time. But something went wrong. The lab was shut down, all records sealed." "What are you saying?" Sarah stood up and walked over to the window. "Your mother was pregnant when she left the company. Robert paid her a substantial severance package. The dates, James, the dates match your birth." The silence dragged on, heavy with innuendo. Finally, James spoke, his voice raspy. "I'm Robert Morrison's son." "Yes." Sarah turned to him. "Which makes what's going on between us, ... impossible," James concluded. He ran a hand through his hair, devastated. "All this time, my mother's medical bills, my sister's education. He was my father, and he never ... double quotes he didn't know," Sarah said quietly. "The agreement was handled by the legal department. I only found out when I searched the Genesis files and found the old documents." James stood abruptly, pacing. "Saw him, not just the assistant sleeping with his boss. I'm the illegitimate son seducing his dead father's wife." James ... Richardson knew. He suddenly realized That's why he hired my mother's old doctor for the hospital board last month. He was gathering ammunition. Sarah walked over to him and took his hand, but he backed away. No, please, I can't. A knock interrupted them. Patricia, looking anxious. Ms. Morrison, the shareholders are coming. Sarah straightened, her CEO mask reshaping despite her inner turmoil. We'll pick this up later. No, James said hollowly. We won't. I'll hand in my resignation within the hour. James, wait. But he was already gone, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of secrets and the echoes of what might have been. In the elevator, James leaned against the wall, his world spinning. His phone buzzed. A text from Richardson. My office. Now, time to choose sides, son. The doors opened onto the executive floor, where fate and betrayal awaited him. In his pocket, the flash drive containing Genesis's evidence was like a hot coal. In his heart, the truth about his origins and his feelings for Sarah were fighting a bitter war. Sometimes the biggest secrets aren't the ones you keep from others, but the ones you keep from yourself. The boardroom at Morrison Technologies vibrated with tension. The shareholders occupied the leather armchairs, their murmurs a symphony of speculation and worry. Sarah Morrison stood at the window, watching the storm clouds gather over Los Angeles, the perfect backdrop for what was to come. In Richardson's office 1 floor below, James Chen stared at the DNA test results spread out on the mahogany desk. You knew this all along, he said, his voice utterly calm. Richardson smiled as he poured himself a scotch. Robert's illegitimate son, of course. I've had 28 years to prepare for this moment. He offered James a drink. You know, you have her eyes. I noticed it the day of your interview. It's why you pushed Sarah to hire me. Smart guy, like your father. Richardson sat back, swirling his glass. Think about it, James. You're Robert Morrison's only living heir. Without Sarah, it could all be yours. You want me to betray her. I want you to claim your birthright. Richardson leaned forward. Sarah's already falling apart, the lonely widow seducing her dead husband's son. The board will remove her within hours. You'll be the sympathetic figure, the long-lost heir, manipulated by an older woman. Together, we can control Morrison Technologies. James tightened his glass. And Project Genesis. Ancient history. Like your mother's agreement. Richardson's smile turned cruel. How are my dear Emily's medical studies going? Too bad her scholarship was suddenly revoked. In the boardroom, Sarah watched the shareholders file in, her mind racing. The USB drive felt heavy in her pocket, evidence that could destroy Richardson, but also reveal James's parentage to the world. Her phone buzzed. A message from James. I'm sorry. Her heart sank. Was he choosing Richardson? Before she could reply, Patricia rushed inside. Ms. Morrison, there's something you need to see. On Patricia's tablet, a news article was already buzzing. Morrison Technologies scandal. Widow's affair with dead CEO's secret son. The attached photo showed her and James making out in the car. The boardroom began to whisper. Sarah felt the walls closing in, but then she saw one detail in the article that changed everything. The timestamp on the photo was off by exactly 3 years. Patricia, she whispered urgently, find me everything you can find about Roberts. Stay at the hospital, not the official records, the security logs, the visitor lists, everything. Everything. As the meeting opened, Richardson strode in, James following like a shadow. Sarah's gaze met James's from across the room, reading the pain and conflict playing out in his expression. Ladies and gentlemen, Richardson began, we are facing a serious situation. Recent events call into question Mrs. Morrison's ability to lead. Actually, Sarah interrupted, rising, I'd like to address the board first. She took the podium, radiating authority, despite her inner turmoil. 3 years ago today, my husband died at St. Michael's Hospital. According to official records, he was alone except for his oldest friend, Maxwell Richardson. Richardson stiffened. Sarah continued, her voice growing louder. But the hospital security records tell a different story. The night before Robert died, Richardson spent 6 hours in the room unusual for a brief farewell visit. The next day, billions disappeared thanks to the Genesis project. These accusations are ridiculous, Richardson stammered. But Sarah wasn't finished. The photo of James and me that's been circulating. It's faked. It's from the night Robert died. But James Chen wasn't working here at the time. In fact, he was at Stanford, which means someone had access to the hospital surveillance footage from 3 years ago, James said suddenly, slowly coming to terms. someone who needed Robert's signature that night. Sarah pulled out her phone and played an audio file Patricia had just sent. Robert Morrison's voice, faint but clear. "Maxwell, what are you doing? That's not what Genesis is for." The meeting room fell silent. Richardson's face paled. "You can't prove." "Actually," James stepped forward, placing a USB drive on the table. "We can. The Genesis project wasn't just about money, was it? The original project, 28 years ago, was genetic research, military applications. When my mother found out what you were really doing, you stopped it. But you never gave up. And 3 years ago," Sarah concluded, "when Robert found out you were reviving the bioweapons project, you couldn't let him rat you out." Richardson hurried to the door, but security was already waiting for him as he was led away. He scolded James. "You're throwing away your legacy." "No," James replied quietly. "I honor it." The next hour passed in a whirl of police statements and council votes. When the dust had settled, Sarah found James in Robert's old office, his eyes fixed on the portrait of his father. "You knew I worked with Richardson," he said without turning round. "I hoped not," Sarah said beside him. "But I knew you had to make this choice yourself. I almost betrayed you when he threatened Emily, but you didn't." She touched his arm. "You chose the truth, just like your father would have." James finally turned to her, his gaze haunted. "Now what?" "Onward," Sarah said simply. "The council knows everything now about Genesis, about your parentage. They voted to make you director of research and development, and you'll work directly with me." Sarah ... He stepped closer. "The press, the scandal ... Let them talk." She held his gaze firmly. "I'm tired of living in fear of what others think. The question is, are you?" Before he could answer, his phone rang his mother's number. It was time to hear more truth, more revelations. But looking at Sarah, he knew that whatever came, they would face it together. The storm had broken, the sun breaking through the clouds over Los Angeles. Sometimes the darkest secrets, once exposed to the light, lose their power to harm. Sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, sets us free. The Chen family's modest home in the San Gabriel Valley seemed smaller than James remembered. He sat at the kitchen table, watching his mother's hands tremble as she poured tea. The morning news played silently on the old TV, showing footage of Richardson's arrest at Morrison Technologies. "I always knew this day would come," Linda Chen said softly, her accent thicker with emotion. "When I saw you accept the job at Morrison Technologies, I wanted to tell you." "Why didn't you?" James asked, trying to hide his pain. Linda sat across from him, her weathered face marked by years of kept secrets. "The deal required silence. Your sister's medical treatments, your education, it all came from that. Money. I couldn't risk losing it." "Did he know?" James's voice cracked. "Robert Morrison, did my father know about me?" "No." James touched her hand. "When I found out what Genesis was really about, genetic manipulation for military purposes, I couldn't participate. Richardson proposed the deal, sealed the records. I never told Robert I was pregnant." Across town, Sarah sat in her home office, watching the media storm unfold across multiple screens. Morrison Technologies heir revealed, widow and secret son, a modern dynasty. Project Genesis, decades of deception exposed. Patricia entered with a stack of papers, the official board statement, the new public relations strategy, and she hesitated, a letter from Richardson's lawyer. Sarah opened the letter, her face hardening as she read it. "He's threatening to release more details about the original Genesis project. He claims it will completely destroy the company's reputation." "Can he do that from prison?" "Maxwell always has contingency plans." Sarah stood up and walked over to the window. "But he's forgetting something. I have Robert's private files. All of them." Her phone buzzed. "James, Mum told me everything. Can we talk?" An hour later, they found themselves in Robert's private office, a room Sarah had kept exactly as he'd left it. James stood in front of his father's desk, picking up a framed photo of Robert in a white coat, circa 1997. He was working on gene therapy. Sarah explained, joining him. He was trying to cure genetic diseases before birth. That was the original Genesis, to heal, not harm. Richardson hijacked it for weapons research. My mother said she fell in love with his vision. James said softly, the chance to help people. Robert had that effect on people. Sarah gently touched the photo. When he found out what Richardson had done, he was devastated. That's why he buried the original research. And now Richardson is threatening to reveal everything. James turned to her. What if we reveal it first, on our terms? Sarah raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. The truth about Genesis, not Richardson's version of the weapon, but my father's original vision. We could restart the research, legitimately this time. Use it to help people, like he wanted. The board would never approve maybe, James said, pulling out his tablet, showing her something that made her eyes widen. I found this in the old lab data. Robert was close to a breakthrough in the treatment of genetic heart defects. With current technology, we could finish what he started. Sarah breathed, turned Genesis from scandal to salvation. Their eyes met, this shared vision creating a new kind of intimacy. James moved closer, but Sarah held up her hand. Wait, before we go any further, personally or professionally, we need to be sure. The media, the public eye, don't care what they think. You should. Sarah's voice was soft. You're Robert Morrison's son, the heir to his legacy. Whatever happens between us, that legacy will be affected. James took her hand. Maybe that's exactly why this needs to happen. To prove that this legacy isn't about DNA or public opinion. It's about choice, about doing what's right despite the price. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. Emily was calling. She was probably seeing the news and wondering why her brother had suddenly become a front-page story. Life wouldn't wait for them to make up their minds. The board meeting is in an hour, Sarah said, stepping back reluctantly. They'll want to talk about Genesis, your position at the company, our relationship, everything. She straightened her jacket. Are you ready? James looked at his father's picture one last time. You know what's weird? My whole life, I've wanted to make a difference, to help people. Turns out I inherited that dream without even knowing it. Sarah smiled. Robert would be proud of both of us. As they prepared to face the board, the threat of Richardson loomed. But sometimes the best defense against darkness is to bring it all out into the open. The question was, were they ready for what that light might reveal? Across town, in a maximum security cell, Maxwell Richardson smiled as his lawyer delivered a message. Soon, the truth about Genesis would come out, and neither Sarah Morrison nor Robert's long-lost son could stop what was coming. The past, it seemed, wasn't done with them. The Morrison Technologies boardroom had never been more crowded. James stood at the podium, presenting the Reborn Genesis project to a mix of skeptical board members and virtual shareholders. Behind him, holographic screens showed genetic sequences and potential medical applications. What my father started 28 years ago wasn't just research, he said firmly. It was hope. Hope for parents who might never have to watch their children suffer from genetic diseases. Hope for families like mine. Sarah watched from her chair, pride mixed with concern. They were taking a huge risk by revealing the company's darkest secrets while proposing its most ambitious project yet. The board's expressions ranged from intrigued to openly hostile. And we are to believe, interrupted Director Chen No, relation, that this sudden revelation of your background has nothing to do with your promotion to Director of R&D. My qualifications speak for themselves, James replied. Stanford MBA, published research in biotechnology. Your qualifications are not in question. Another board member chimed in. Your relationship with Ms. Morrison. Yes. Sarah stood, her authority filling the room. My private life is not up for discussion. The question before the board is simple. Do we bury Genesis forever, or do we fulfill Robert Morrison's original vision? Before anyone could respond, Patricia burst in, tablet in hand. Ms. Morrison, you need to see this right now. On the screen, a breaking news story flashed. The truth about Genesis revealed. Morrison's secret son, the product of a decades-long experiment. The article, from Richardson's private files, claimed that James was not just Robert's illegitimate child, but Genesis's first success, a genetically engineered embryo, designed to inherit specific traits, the perfect heir, created in a lab. The boardroom erupted. James stared at the article, his world reeling. Sarah reached for him, but he stepped back, his face ashen. James, ... Is that true? Her voice was barely audible. Did you know? Of course not. Sarah moved closer. Richardson is lying. He's trying to destroy us both. Really? Richardson's voice boomed over the meeting room speakers. He had successfully hacked into their system. Sarah, darling, check Robert's private server. The password is still your wedding date, isn't it? Looking for Project Genesis, Subject 0. Security quickly disconnected the connection. but the damage was done. James was already moving, heading toward Robert's old office. Sarah followed, her heels clicking quickly on the marble floor. They found the file exactly where Richardson had indicated. Sarah's hands trembled as she entered the password. James, standing still beside her, the screen filled with data, genetic sequences, lab reports, and a video. Robert Morrison's face appeared, 28 years younger. "First try, subject 0, he said, looking tired but excited. "After 12 unsuccessful attempts, we've successfully modified the embryo. If it works, we'll have proof that genetic enhancement is possible. Linda's game, she understands the risks." James staggered back. "My mother... Did she volunteer?" Sarah flipped through more files, her face ashen. "She didn't just work here. She was part of the original research team. And you, I was an experiment." James's laugh was hollow. "The perfect successor, conceived in my father's lab. No wonder Richardson was so interested." "Doesn't change anything," Sarah said, reaching out to him. "You're still you." "Really?" He pulled away. "How do we know what's real? My intelligence, my willingness to help people, are they mine, or just programmed DNA?" "James, listen to me." Sarah grabbed his arm. "I've known programmed people. Richardson, the picture perfect on paper, empty inside. You're not like them. Your choices, your heart, they're yours. Our heart." His voice was bitter. "Is that real too, or just a genetic attraction to success and power? You know it's more than that. Really." He moved closer to the window as the storm clouds gathered outside again. "Everything I thought I knew about myself is a lie. My mother's love, my father's absence, even my feelings for you, it's all part of one vast experiment." "Then, why fight Richardson?" Sarah snapped. "Why choose truth over power? Those weren't programmed choices, James. They were yours." Before he could answer, alarms blared through the building. Patricia's voice came over the intercom. "Mrs. Morrison, Richardson has escaped, and he downloaded something from the server. Something called Genesis Prime." James straightened. "There's more. There's always more," Sarah said darkly. "But right now, we have a choice. We can let these revelations destroy us, or use them." James finished, a glimmer of his father's fire in his eyes. "Show the world what Genesis was truly meant to be." Together, he looked at her, beyond the scandal, beyond the genetics, to the woman who had chosen truth over security, love over appearances. His next words would change everything. Together, outside, thunder rumbled over Los Angeles. Richardson was there, armed with new secrets, new threats. The media circulated, the board fractured, and decades of lies unraveled. But sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, sets us free and allows us to become who we were meant to be, programmed or not. Lightning cracked the Los Angeles sky as Sarah Morrison and James Chen raced into the underground labs of Morrison Technologies. The Genesis Prime files had revealed Richardson's ultimate goal, and it was worse than they'd imagined. "He's trying to access cryogenic storage," James said, his footsteps echoing in the sterile hallways. "All the original Genesis samples are here, including yours." Sarah's voice was tight with worry. "If he releases proof that the genetic engineering was successful, every government and corporation in the world will want this technology," James finished, "and Richardson knows where to sell it." They reached the security doors of the deep storage facility. Sarah's fingerprints granted them access, but inside, they discovered chaos. Frozen storage units had been breached, their contents gone. At a central terminal, a familiar figure worked frantically. "It's over, Maxwell," Sarah shouted, spinning Richardson around. He looked disheveled, desperate but dangerous. "Over," he laughed. "This is just the beginning. Do you know what we accomplished with Genesis? Not just genetic enhancement. We've created the next stage of human evolution. And you," he said, pointing at James, "are living proof." "I'm not proof of anything." James stepped forward. "Except that pretending to be God has consequences." "Pretending to be God?" Richardson's eyes flashed. "We were going to save humanity, eliminate disease, extend life, enhance human potential. But Robert got scared. He buried it all when he saw how perfect you were becoming. He couldn't handle the implications." "What implications?" Sarah asked. "That love itself could be engineered." Richardson smiled cruelly. "Why do you think you're so drawn to each other? It's not destiny, it's genetics." James was designed to be irresistible to powerful women. the ideal successor to a corporation, guaranteed to merge bloodlines and consolidate power. Sarah felt James stiffen beside her. You're lying, really? Compare his genetic sequence to Genesis's original parameters. Heightened empathy, strengthened attraction markers. Everything is calculated so that he'll eventually end up exactly where he is, at your side, in charge of Morrison Technologies. You're wrong. James's voice trembled. About everything. My father wasn't playing God. He was trying to help people. And when he saw what you'd done, he stopped everything. He was weak. Richardson spat. Just like you are. All that potential, wasted on morality and love. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. But I can still fix it. This disk contains everything. The complete Genesis research, proof of successful enhancement, and a list of buyers who will make me billions. You'll start a genetic arms race, Sarah realized. Countries creating super soldiers, companies training perfect executives. Evolution, my dear. Survival of the fittest. Richardson's thumb hovered over the device. One click, and it's uploaded to servers around the world. James took another step forward. You've forgotten something, Maxwell. If I'm designed to be perfect, then my choices matter. My father designed me to be capable of anything, but he let me choose what was right. Idiot, you're just programming. No. James moved with sudden speed, with heightened reflexes he himself hadn't known he possessed. The device flew from Richardson's hands as they fought. Sarah lunged to propel it, but Richardson pulled out a weapon. Back. Time slowed. Sarah saw James's eyes widen, saw him start to move. She saw Richardson squeeze the trigger, and she understood, with perfect clarity, his choice. The shot echoed through the lab. Sarah stood over Richardson, the backup pistol in her bag still smoking. The bullet had struck him in the shoulder, painful but not fatal. Perfect shot, James said softly. I had practice. Sarah managed a weak smile. Robert insisted. I learned self-defense after the first kidnapping attempt. As security moved in, Sarah and James watched Richardson being led away. The Genesis drive was secured, its contents safe. He was right about one thing, James said later, when they were in Robert's old office. I'm a genius. Every attraction, every feeling. Sarah touched her face. Do you really believe that? That what we feel isn't real? I don't know. How could I, because of this? She handed him one last file, one Richardson hadn't known existed. I found it in Robert's personal safe. James read, his eyes brimming with tears. It was a letter from his father, dated just before his death. To my son. Yes, I knew about you. I discovered the truth years ago, but I respected your mother's wish to remain silent. What Richardson never understood was that Genesis wasn't about creating perfection. It was about creating possibility. You were given gifts, but every choice was yours, including the choice to love. Your DNA may be enhanced, but your heart is entirely your own. With pride and love, your father. He knew, James whispered, all this time. And he was right, Sarah said. Your choices have proven it. You chose truth over power, love over ambition. These weren't planned decisions. They were yours. They were yours. Outside, the storm was breaking, the sun breaking through the clouds. James held Sarah close. Now what? Now, she smiled. We do what your father wanted. We use Genesis to help people, not control them. And we do it together. The board won't like it. The board will adapt. After all, her eyes twinkled. We have perfect genes for us. Their laughter echoed through the office, a sound of freedom and possibility. Sometimes the greatest experience lies not in our DNA, but in our ability to choose love over fear, truth over power. And in the end, that's the only improvement that matters. In the months that followed, Morrison Technologies launched a revolutionary gene therapy program, helping thousands of families affected by genetic diseases. The media eventually grew tired of the widow and the heir story, especially when their work began to save lives. As for Sarah and James, they proved that love, whether artificial or not, has a power all its own. Sometimes the most perfect creations are the ones we never planned. Richardson served his sentence. His dreams of controlling evolution locked away with him, but his legacy endured in an unexpected way. He proved that humanity's next step would come not from manipulating genes, but from choosing how to use the gifts we are given. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all.